I spent 43 years and more money than I will ever admit chasing the perfect fishing setup across every reservoir in the Southeast. 5 Angler of the Year titles sit on my shelf, a Hall of Fame plaque hangs on my wall, and my garage looks like a tackle shop exploded. Size. Here is the part that keeps me up at night when I let myself think about it honestly for more than 5 minutes straight. At least half of everything in that garage never gave me one single advantage over gear costing a quarter of the price tag. I added it up last winter on a rainy Sunday when I had nothing better to do than face the ugly truth about my spending. Exhales. The number came out somewhere north of $12,000 wasted on premium labels that performed exactly like their budget cousins sitting right beside them. $12,000 gone because I believed what the box told me instead of what the water was showing me every single day. And the kicker, the real gut punch, is that some of my biggest tournament wins came on the cheapest gear I owned. Let me tell you about a morning on Guntersville that cracked my whole worldview wide open like an egg on a hot dock. It was a fall regional tournament, 40 boats, serious money on the line, and my primary rod snapped clean during practice the day before. I drove to a bait shop off Highway 431 and grabbed a medium-heavy combo off the clearance rack for $31 and change. I almost put it back because the price tag embarrassed me. I thought people would see it and assume I did not know what I was doing out there. I fished that $31 rod the next morning against guys throwing $400 custom sticks built by hand with their names engraved on the blank. I won that tournament by nearly 2 pounds, and not one person on that weigh-in stage asked me what rod I was using because nobody could tell. That moment should have woken me up right then, but I went right back to buying premium gear the following week like nothing happened. I was the biggest sucker on the water, and I did not even know it yet. What I am going to lay out for you over the next few minutes are 5 specific premium features that the fishing industry uses to separate you from your money. Not opinions, not hunches. I tested these things side by side on the same lakes where I have fished my entire adult life and built my reputation. You are going to see exactly which expensive upgrades perform identically to budget versions and which marketing words are designed purely to make you feel inferior. By the end of this, you will know how to spot the difference between real quality and a fancy sticker on a plastic package at the tackle counter. I figure the average angler watching this can save $300 to $500 a year without losing a single fish or a single ounce of performance. That is gas money for an entire season of weekend trips, or a guided day on whatever dream lake you have been putting off for years now. The manufacturers are not going to thank me for this one, and honestly, some of my old sponsors might never speak to me again after today. But I would rather lose a sponsorship than watch one more hardworking angler hand over money for something that does absolutely nothing on the water. Lie number 1, premium fluorocarbon line that costs 3 times more than the budget spool and performs exactly the same underwater and on every knot. For over 15 years, I bought one brand exclusively, the $25 spool, never once even considering the $8 option sitting right next to it. I told myself the expensive stuff was thinner, stronger, more invisible, faster sinking, everything the label promised in bold letters with a picture of a trophy base. Then one October afternoon on a Tennessee River ledge tournament, I ran out of my precious premium fluoro halfway through day 1 with fish still biting. My co-angler Danny, a younger guy who fished on a shoestring budget and made no apologies for it, tossed me a spool of bulk fluorocarbon. I looked at that spool like he had handed me a live grenade, but I had no choice, so I tied on a jig and dropped it down a 12-foot ledge. 20 minutes later, I pulled a 6-pound 8 largemouth off a chunk rock pile, and the hook set felt identical. The fight felt identical, and the line held through every stump and ledge it touched. I sat in that boat staring at the label on Danny's cheap spool like it owed me 15 years of refunds and a written apology. When I got home from that tournament, I cleared off my kitchen table and set up the most obsessive line test my wife has ever had to tolerate. I tied identical Palomar knots on both the premium and budget fluorocarbon in 12-pound test and pulled them on a digital scale until they snapped. I dragged both lines across concrete riprap at the marina, across submerged cedar stumps and along dock pilings, counting passes until each one finally gave out. I dropped weighted hooks on both lines into my buddy's swimming pool and timed the sink rate with a stopwatch down to the 10th of a second. I lowered both lines in front of an underwater camera in clear winter water on Guntersville and compared the footage frame by frame on my laptop screen. Every single category came back so close that you could not pick a winner with a straight face or a clear conscience about it. Brake strength varied by less than half a pound, abrasion failure happened within 2 passes of each other, and sink rate was dead identical on every single drop. But here is the part that genuinely made me angry at myself for all those years of blind brand loyalty and wasted cash at the register. The budget fluorocarbon actually tested stronger on knot strength by nearly a full pound, because the premium brand engineers their line stiffer for what they market as enhanced sensitivity, and that extra stiffness prevents the knot from cinching down cleanly, creating tiny gaps that weaken the whole connection right where it matters most. I am genuinely curious about something, and I want you to be honest with me down in the comments section right now if you would. How many of you have ever actually tested your expensive line against a cheap one side by side with a scale and a stopwatch and real numbers? I am betting almost none of you have, because I fished for 4 decades before I bothered to do it myself, and I should have known better. The premium line companies count on that. They count on you trusting the package instead of testing the product against anything real on your own water. I did the math on my fluorocarbon spending over 15 years, and the number came out to roughly $600 more than I needed to spend on fishing line alone. $600 on string that goes in the water and eventually gets cut off and thrown away no matter what name is printed on the spool. That is not an investment in performance. That is a subscription to a marketing department's mortgage payment funded entirely by your trust and my laziness. I could have spent that $600 on fuel and fished 30 extra days on the water, and those 30 days would have made me a better angler than any spool of line ever could. But fluorocarbon is just the opening act. The next lie hits harder because it goes straight to the heart of how rod companies price their products and sleep at night. Lie number 2, those fancy rod technologies with science fiction names that sound like they belong on a spacecraft but add absolutely zero measurable benefit on the water. Nano-resin matrix, aerospace-grade carbon fiber, proprietary blank technology, cross-weave molecular bonding. I have seen all of these phrases on rod boxes, and I bought every single one of them. I spotted a full-page magazine ad for a rod featuring something called nano-resin aerospace-grade carbon, and the price tag said $400 like that was reasonable. I bought it because the ad made me feel like I was falling behind, like everyone else on the tournament circuit had already upgraded, and I was the last fool still fishing yesterday's technology. I took that $400 rod to my home lake and fished it side by side with my old reliable $80 medium heavy fast action stick I had been using for 6 years straight. Same 12-pound fluorocarbon, same half-ounce jig, same brush piles along the same creek channel I have fished since before that rod company even existed as a brand. I cast both rods. I worked jigs through heavy cover with both rods, I set hooks on largemouth with both rods, and I focused hard trying to feel the difference. I wanted that $400 to mean something. I wanted to feel it in my hand, and I could not find it no matter how hard I tried. Now here is what the rod industry does not put in those glossy magazine ads or mention at the ICAST trade show when they unveil their newest technology name. The vast majority of rods sold in America between $60 and $400 come off production lines in the same industrial zone in Weihai, China, or a small cluster of Korean factories using the same Terray carbon fiber or licensed equivalents. The difference between a $60 rod and a $200 rod from competing brands is often the guide brand, the reel seat material, the cosmetic thread wraps, and whatever proprietary technology name the marketing team invented that quarter. The real jump in quality that you can actually feel in your hand happens between a $20 rod and an $80 rod. That is where you gain real sensitivity, meaningful weight reduction, and noticeably better balance during a long day of casting. The jump from $80 to $400 is functionally invisible for 95% of anglers, including most of the guys fishing weekend tournaments right alongside me every single season. I tested a $75 medium heavy from a budget brand against that $350 premium stick with the nano-whatever blank technology on the same reservoir ledges for a full week. Casting distance differed by less than 2 feet measured with a tape on the bank, weight differed by half an ounce on a postal scale, and my catch rate was identical across 5 straight days. The rod does not know what it cost, only your wallet knows that, and your wallet is the one suffering while the rod performs exactly the same. Those first 2 lies probably cost you $100 here and there, and that stings, but it will not ruin your year or change your life in any dramatic way. But lie number 3, this one bleeds you on every single trip because it hits the gear you replace most often and buy in the largest quantities all season long. I am talking about the hooks, the swivels, the snaps, the sinkers, all that terminal tackle sitting in your box right now with premium labels and coatings you paid triple for without questioning it. The fishing industry figured out years ago that if they stamp surgical-grade steel and triple-coated corrosion barrier on a package of 5 hooks and charge you $8, most anglers will pay it without blinking because nobody wants to lose a big fish on a cheap hook. I believed that story for 20 years until my 15-year-old grandson Tyler showed up at the lake one Saturday morning with a 100-pack of offset worm hooks he ordered online for $8 total, which works out to about 8 cents per hook compared to my $2 per hook from the premium brand I had trusted since before that kid was born. We fished the same plastic worms on the same structure on my home lake using the same retrieve, and that boy outfished me 5 bass to 2 on 8-cent hooks while I sat there with my $2 hooks wondering what exactly I had been paying for all these decades. A teenager with bargain bin tackle outfished a Hall of Fame angler on his own home water, and the first lie I told myself was that he just got lucky, but deep down I already knew the truth was sitting right there in his cheap tackle box staring back at me. Now, the first lie I need to expose about premium hooks is one that even the most experienced anglers on this lake still fall for every single season, and it is going to change how you shop forever. Modern hook manufacturing has gotten so standardized across the globe that the gap between premium and budget has shrunk to almost nothing meaningful. I pulled hooks from both packages and put them under a magnifying glass on my workbench to compare the actual cutting edges side by side. Both had chemically sharpened points that would stick in your thumbnail with barely any pressure applied at all from either brand. Both had consistent eye closures, clean bends, and a dark coating that looked identical under magnification to my tired old eyes. I fished those premium hooks and Tyler's budget hooks through an entire summer season, tracking every single fish on both sets. After 20 bass on each set, I checked the points again, and both still stuck clean in my thumbnail without any touch-up needed. The premium hook showed a tiny advantage in corrosion resistance after sitting in a damp tackle box for 6 weeks through Alabama humidity. But I rinse my hooks with fresh water after every trip anyway, so that 6-week corrosion test means absolutely nothing in my real-world routine. Now, I want to be fair here because there is one narrow exception where spending more on hooks actually makes a legitimate difference on the water. Specialized hooks designed for very specific finesse techniques. Your drop shot hooks with that precise wire gauge. Your wacky rig hooks with the weed guard placement. Those do matter because the geometry and wire diameter directly affect how the bait moves and presents in the water column. But even in that specialized category, I found budget alternatives from smaller brands that performed at 90% of the premium level for a third of the cost. For your standard offset worm hooks, your flipping hooks, your EWG hooks, the workhorses that account for 80% of the hooks in your box, the premium price buys you a fancier package and absolutely nothing else that a fish will ever notice. I bent both hook sets on a scale to test resistance to opening under load, and the numbers came back within half a pound of each other every single time. The terminal tackle industry survives on a simple fear that lives in every angler's gut. Nobody wants to lose the fish of a lifetime on a cheap hook. That fear is real, but the premise behind it is manufactured because the cheap hooks hold just as well as the expensive ones in every test I ran. So let me add up what we have covered so far because the running total is going to hit you harder than any one of these lies did alone. Switching from premium fluorocarbon to budget fluorocarbon saves the average angler roughly $40 to $60 per year, depending on how often you respool your reels. Dropping from a $400 rod to an $80 rod that performs identically saves you $320 on your next rod purchase. Buying bulk hooks instead of premium 5-packs saves you another $50 to $70 a year if you fish as often as most of the guys I know. Add it all up conservatively, and you are looking at $300 to $500 a year sitting in your pocket instead of sitting in a marketing department's revenue column. That is a new kayak every 2 years if you have been wanting to fish smaller water without trailering a big boat to the ramp. That is a guided trip to your dream lake. Okeechobee, Fork, Falcon, wherever you have been staring at pictures and telling yourself maybe next year. That is money you worked hard to earn, and the fishing industry took it from you with fancy adjectives printed on a cardboard box in a fluorescent lit aisle. If this kind of straight talk saves you even $50 this season, hit that subscribe button right now so you catch the next video before the tackle companies figure out how to shut me up. But we are only at the halfway mark, and the next two lies are the ones that genuinely got under my skin because they target something deeper than your wallet. They go after your confidence, your belief that you need more technology and more options to compete with the guy in the next boat over on tournament morning. My buddy Ray called me one evening about 3 years ago laughing so hard I thought he was going to choke on his sweet tea right through the phone. He had just bought 2 bait casting reels. One was an 11-bearing model that cost him $300 with a magnetic braking system that had its own trademark name. The other was a 5-bearing reel he grabbed off the shelf at Academy Sports for $70 because he needed a spare for his kid's rod. He covered both reel bodies with electrical tape so you could not see the brand name or the bearing count printed on the frame. He brought both to the dock the next morning and handed them to me without saying a word except try these and tell me which one is the expensive one. Lie number 4. The ball bearing count and those fancy braking system names that reel manufacturers use to justify charging you double for the same basic mechanical function. I stood on that dock cranking both reels with my eyes closed like some kind of fishing sommelier trying to detect notes of oak and cherry in a glass of gas station wine. I felt the handle rotation, the engagement click, the smoothness through a full retrieve, and the drag tension on a slow pull of line. I pointed to the reel in my left hand and told Ray with absolute confidence that it was the $300 model because the retrieve felt like butter on warm glass. Ray about fell off the dock into the Tennessee River because the reel in my left hand was the $70 Academy Sports Special with 5 bearings and a name I had never heard of. The $300 reel with 11 bearings and a braking system that sounded like it belonged on a NASA spacecraft was sitting in my right hand feeling perfectly fine but completely indistinguishable from its budget twin. That moment should have been humiliating, but honestly it was liberating because it meant I could stop chasing bearing counts on spec sheets like they actually meant something real. Here is what the reel companies will never explain in their catalogs or their pro staff videos because it would destroy their entire pricing structure overnight. After you cross a threshold of about 4 to 6 quality bearings in the right positions, every additional bearing adds so little smoothness that human fingers cannot detect the difference during normal fishing. Some manufacturers stuff cheap micro bearings into the handle knob or the line roller, positions where a simple bushing works perfectly fine, just to print a higher number on the box because 13 looks better than 7 in a side-by-side comparison at the store. The feature that actually determines whether your reel lasts 3 seasons or 30 seasons is the material of the main drive gear and pinion gear. Brass gears hold up under load for decades, while zinc alloy gears strip and grind under the same stress within a few hard seasons. The second critical factor is how well the body seals keep water, sand, and microscopic grit out of the gear train where it chews up moving parts from the inside out over time. Neither of those features gets a flashy trademark name because you cannot photograph gear metallurgy, and seal engineering does not fit on a billboard next to a jumping bass. I have a bait caster on my jig rod right now that cost me $62, has brass gearing, decent seals, and 6 bearings in the positions that actually matter for smooth operation. That reel has been on that rod for 8 seasons, caught well over 1,000 largemouth bass, and still feels tight and smooth because I rinse it after every trip and oil it twice a year. And lie number 5, the biggest money pit in all of fishing. The one that emptied my wallet faster than all the other 4 combined over 4 decades of competitive angling. The idea that you need 40 different colors of the same bait to catch fish consistently in every condition you might possibly encounter on the water. I know this is the big one because I can feel my blood pressure rising just talking about it, and my wife would confirm that this topic has started more arguments in our house than anything except maybe thermostat settings. I opened my storage unit last winter and counted soft plastic bags stacked in bins from floor to ceiling, like some kind of evidence locker for a fishing addiction intervention. I owned 63 distinct color variations of one single brand's creature bait, 63 colors of the same bait shape that all swim the same way underwater. Watermelon red flake, watermelon candy, watermelon magic, watermelon copper. I had 14 versions of watermelon alone, and I could not tell half of them apart without reading the label. I caught more fish in one full season using only 3 colors than I did the previous year using over 60, and that is not some motivational poster slogan I made up to sound wise. That number came straight from my tournament log where I track every fish, every bait, every color, every condition, and I checked it twice because I did not believe it myself the first time. I committed to a full season experiment on the tournament circuit, fishing nothing but 3 base color families across every technique I normally throw in competition. Green pumpkin for my natural profile in clear to lightly stained water, the color that mimics crawfish, bluegill fry, and every other piece of forage that largemouth bass eat on highland reservoirs with decent visibility. Black and blue for my contrast bait in stained to muddy water and overcast skies, the color that punches a hard silhouette against murky backgrounds when fish are hunting by shadow and movement more than by precise color recognition. White with chartreuse for my reaction bait, spinner baits, swim jigs, topwater, the color that triggers aggressive strikes when bass are chasing shad or feeding in schools near the surface regardless of water clarity. I logged every single fish across that season and compared the numbers against the previous year when I rotated through 60-plus colors like a nervous painter who cannot commit to a canvas. My catch rate was statistically identical, and my tournament finishes actually improved slightly, probably because I spent less time digging through tackle boxes, second-guessing color choices, and more time making casts with the bait already tied on and working. Largemouth bass have dichromatic vision that processes greens and reds primarily, with limited ability to distinguish blues, and below 10 to 15 feet most colors converge toward the same gray-blue murk regardless of what that bait looked like sitting in your palm under sunlight at the truck. The most successful tournament anglers I know personally, guys who have fished regional circuits for 20-plus years, carry 5 to 8 base colors in their working rotation and never deviate from them. The other 300 baits stacked in their rod lockers are sponsor obligations for the weigh-in camera, and those bags have never been opened on the water. I want to hear from you right now. What is your one absolute cannot leave the house without it bait color that you would fish if you could only pick one for the rest of your life? Drop it in the comments because I will bet you a spool of cheap fluorocarbon that most of you name green pumpkin, black and blue, or white, and that proves the whole point sitting right there in your own answer. So there you have it, 5 lies, 5 ways the industry has been reaching into your back pocket while shaking your hand and smiling for the camera on the front of the package. But here is the part that was hardest for me to admit, and I need you to stay with me for this because it matters more than everything I just said combined. The 5 lies on the box are not the real problem. The real problem is the lie we tell ourselves every single time we walk into a tackle shop with our wallet already open. We want to believe that the next purchase will close the gap between where we are and where we dream of being as anglers on the water. It is easier to swipe a credit card than to admit we need more patience, more time learning our home lake, more practice with casting accuracy, and more discipline in reading what the water and weather are actually telling us every single morning. The hardest lie to face is not the one printed in bold letters on a cardboard box. It is the one we whisper to ourselves standing in that fluorescent aisle thinking this rod or this reel or this color will finally make us the fishermen we see in our own imagination. I told myself that lie for 30 years, and the day I stopped, the day I stood in my garage looking at all that gear and realized my 5 best days on the water involved the simplest equipment I owned and lakes I knew like my own heartbeat. That was the day I actually started getting better at this sport I have loved my entire life. Now, I do not want you walking away thinking I said all gear is garbage and nothing matters, because that is not the truth either, and it would not be fair. A reliable fish finder in the $200 to $400 range, not the $3,000 live imaging flagship, just a solid traditional sonar unit that shows you depth, structure, and water temperature. That is a genuine game changer that puts you on fish you would literally never find by guessing alone. A quality reel in the $80 to $150 sweet spot with brass gears, decent seals, and 5 or 6 reel bearings in the right positions, that is worth every penny because it will last you a decade of hard use without complaint. Good polarized sunglasses, a life jacket that fits properly, rain gear that actually keeps water out, those protect your body and your ability to see the water, and I will never tell anyone to cut corners on safety equipment no matter how tight the budget gets. But the single best investment I have ever made in my fishing had nothing to do with anything you can buy at a store or order from a website with free shipping. Every dollar I saved on marketing lies went straight into gas money for one more trip to the reservoir, one more morning studying how the shad moved through a creek channel at dawn, one more afternoon watching how bass repositioned on a ledge when the wind shifted from the south. That time on the water, learning one more brush pile, feeling one more temperature break, making one more 1,000 casts until the motion lives in your muscle memory, that will improve your fishing more than any purchase on earth ever could. And I will stand behind that statement with my name and my reputation on the line.
There was a tournament years ago on a Tennessee Valley reservoir. Big event, 50 boats, serious anglers with $50,000 bass boats, and electronics packages that cost more than my first house. I was rigging up at the ramp when a 14-foot aluminum John boat backed down the lane next to me with a 25 horsepower outboard that sounded like it was clearing its throat. An old man climbed out, weathered hands, faded cap, one medium-heavy spinning rod that looked like it came from a pawn shop shelf, and a single small tackle box with maybe 10 lures rattling around inside. I watched guys on the ramp glance at him the way you glance at someone who wandered into the wrong building and does not realize it yet. That man weighed in the biggest bag of the tournament, 5 largemouth bass, 22 pounds and change, on that pawn shop rod with those 10 baits from that aluminum boat. He knew that lake the way I know the back of my own hand. Every ledge, every submerged brush pile, every depth change where the channel swings close to the bank and the water cools 2 degrees in August. He did not need a single piece of premium gear because he carried something in his head that no amount of money can buy at any store in any state in this country. That old man on that aluminum boat with 1 rod and 10 baits, that is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen in 43 years of fishing. And that is what this sport is really about when you strip away every marketing lie and every fancy label and just listen to the water. If Big Jim saved you even one bad purchase today, one overpriced spool of line, one rod you did not need, one bag of baits in a color you already own in 3 other nearly identical shades, hit that subscribe button because I am going to keep testing gear, keep telling the truth, and keep saving you money every single week on this channel. A like helps more people find this video, and I genuinely mean that. The algorithm rewards that little thumbs up more than you probably realize. And every new viewer is one more angler who stops overpaying for marketing words. Drop a comment and tell me your story. What is the most expensive piece of gear you ever bought that turned out to be no better than the cheap version sitting right next to it on the shelf? Next time I am flipping this whole thing completely around and showing you the 5 cheapest pieces of gear that outperform everything else sitting in my tackle room right now. One of them costs less than a cup of gas station coffee, and it has caught me more bass than rods that cost $300. You absolutely do not want to miss that one. I have been Big Jim for over 4 decades on these lakes, and I am not stopping until every angler watching this keeps more money in their pocket and more fish on their line. Tight lines, smart money, and I will see you on the water.